in person, and I know many of them are also joining from quite a challenging time zone. So thank you, Jeff, Yelena, colleagues who are joining quite early in the morning on that side. So my name is Khalil Walji. I'm a scientist based at C4ECRAF, World Agroforestry in Nairobi. And I'm the coordinator of a program called Landscapes for the Future, which effectively is I work at the intersection of research for development, climate change, and livelihoods. And I've been working, I came from FAO, I was at FAO for a few years, and I had the pleasure of working with this panel and this sort of group of partners who are working together to develop this new forest restoration planning tool. So I'm excited, I'll be your moderator and guiding us through this session. So se.plan is a spatially explicit planning tool. It's hosted on FAO's se.plan platform, which is where we get the first SE in the tool, se.plan. It's available to all users who have a Google Earth Engine account. And effectively, I won't say too much about the tool because some of my colleagues will do that for us. But the tool's been in development for a few years now. We actually did a soft launch at the start of the UN decade in June 6th of last year. And since then, the tool has been tested and been deployed in a few countries. So we have some colleagues today who are joining us as well to share some reflections on how they've implemented the tool, which will be great to hear from. But effectively, se.plan emphasizes and incorporates information on benefits, costs, and risks associated with forest restoration. And so we'll explore some of its development, some of the layers that are included in it, and what really makes it innovative in terms of the restoration planning process. So I'll say no more on that. To get us started for today's session, I'd like to invite Remy D'Annunzio, who's a forestry officer with FAO in Rome, and he'll provide us with a background on the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration and how this tool is playing a role. Remy, over to you.
Thank you very much, Khalil. Hi, everybody. Very nice to be here and to welcome you also to this our first side event. I'm going to give some background information on se.plan and on why we developed the tool and what it's for. I'd just like to mention that I'm presenting on behalf of Julian Fox, our team leader for the National Forest Monitoring, who could not be here today. But yeah, without further ado, let's dive into the overall context in which we have developed se.plan. So first, let us remind that all the political commitments throughout the Bond Challenge, the 2020 initiative, the AFR 100, the land degradation neutrality, all of that have set very ambitious restoration targets. The amounts that it sums up to is about 1 billion hectares that needs to be restored within the decade, and forest restoration is a very important part of that commitment. And in order to scale that, forest restoration planning is a key element. Initially, there's been ample research on where forests can grow and where we can find potential for trees to grow. And in 2019, FAO teamed up with a team of researchers from the ETH Zurich to quantify and to identify the Earth's capacity to grow trees. So that was one first step into the equation, but that was just an initial step, because biophysical potential is important, but it's only part of the puzzle. And where we do restoration depends on on many other factors. And where people take the decision to restore is a much more complex equation than just where trees can potentially be grown. So because we have kept that, because we tried to develop a tool that would keep this equation into account, and because we know that there's no one-size-fits-all solution, we have tried to develop a tool that is versatile and that can ingest many different type of layers and of information source, and that can combine both biophysical and socio-economic aspects to determine the best potential for restoration in any place in the world. And the idea is really to provide where restoration can be most beneficial and cost effective. The tool today, we will, so as Khalil mentioned, it's been softly launched already a year and a half ago. I'm not going to dive too much into the tool itself because Jeff and Andrea will cover that. But let's just say that we have an easy interface where we can either use default layers, both for biophysical or socioeconomic, or we can use custom data sets that the users can directly upload themselves or select themselves. And that flexibility allows to use different levels of ownership and of data relevance to produce different suitability maps for restoration. Of course, this is not something we've done alone. This has been developed collaboratively with a team of scientists from University of Duke, from the SIG, the Spatial Informatics Group, University of Peking, and the Silver Carbon team, with many different experts in different fields like economic, remote sensing, forestry, as well as informatics. The other side of the collaboration, so that was on the scientific part of the collaboration. The other side is many different consultations we've had with the practitioners from Ethiopia, Uganda, Kenya, Cambodia, Vietnam, Myanmar, Brazil, Colombia. And through this, we have developed the tool that is now completely available inside the se.plan platform. I'll briefly touch base on se.plan. It's a data processing platform that is completely free and completely open source, and that can allow any user across the world to use the cloud computing resources that are available out there, all the public data sets that are big and voluminous and that are can be complicated to use, are very easily leveraged through the se.plan platform. And we have developed se.plan in this platform so that it can be used and implemented by our different users. We have more detailed information on the tool itself, so I'll stop here just to remind us that we have also developed se.plan in the context of the UN decade on ecosystem restoration, and particularly as one of the first tasks of the monitoring task force. As you probably know, the main objective of the task force is to develop a monitoring framework and indicators, and also to catalyze investment through social-based guidance and tools. And se.plan is exactly fitting that place. It's been really developed so that we can start using all available data layers around to produce the most informed restoration possible in planning. Right, so what are the next steps? We'll continue working on developing the tool itself. I'm very happy to tell you that we have allowed different translation possibilities, and it's now available in Chinese, for instance. So we are able to make se.plan available in basically any language in a very easy way. We have plenty of country applications that are coming up, including the UN Decade flagships. And the idea now is we have a good basis of layers for the forest ecosystems, but there's plenty other ecosystems that are targeted by the UN Decade, and this is going to be one of our next focus coming up. And potentially, but maybe that's yeah, that will require more funding and more expertise and more work. In any case, I think I'll stop here, and I hope I've given you a brief overview of where se.plan stands and where it comes from. And I will give back the floor to Khalil.
Wonderful. Thanks, Remy. Also for stepping in so late for our colleague Julian. Julian would have loved to be here, but he's unable to make it, but just so everyone's aware, he's also the coordinator of the task force, which is leading the monitoring on the UN decade. Great. So I think we'll just jump right in. I'm going to turn the screen and the microphone over to Dr. Jeff Vincent to give us an overview of the development of the socioeconomic layers and the integration into the se.plan platform. Jeff, over to you.
Thank you, Khalil. Elena, could I have the first slide, please? Great. Before I begin the substance of my presentation, I want to make two general comments. The first is to state what a privilege it's been to be part of the team that has worked together to develop this tool. And it's my pleasure to have worked with FAO and to be sharing the panel here with my colleagues. And secondly, and this was mentioned by Remy, we do continue to develop the tool. So we're very much interested in hearing your suggestions for a way that it could be usefully improved. Next slide, please. Okay, as Remy has said, se.plan is a spatially explicit forest restoration tool. It's hosted by CEPL and it's Google Earth Engine based. At the moment, it focuses on 139 countries in Latin America, Africa, and the Near East, and Asia and the Pacific. These are all countries that were lower middle income for most of the years during the last couple of decades. Next slide, please. Now, a little bit more about the rationale for this tool. Why did we develop it? Well, it's to provide support to stakeholders, restoration stakeholders who are involved in planning processes for forest restoration. And how we provide that support through the tool is by identifying locations where the benefits of forest restoration are high relative to their costs. And these locations are determined subject to constraints that users can impose. Could be biophysical constraints, could be socioeconomic constraints. And I'll say more about the constraints later in the talk. And by forest restoration, we're referring to the establishment of tree-dominated ecosystems that supply what are commonly thought of as forest goods and services. These can be goods in a very tangible sense, such as fuel, wood, and timber, but also can be important ecosystem services, such as carbon sequestration and biodiversity habitat. And I note this to point out that this tool is not restricted to the regeneration of forests through natural means, with those forests being composed entirely of native species. Important as that may be in certain locations, the tool does allow for consideration of planting of forests, not just relying on natural regeneration. Next, please. Now, key to the tool is the identification of sites where restoration is potentially feasible. And so we start with information on where trees can grow on the surface of the planet. And I believe Remy mentioned the work with ETH Zurich that's developed a layer that identifies such locations. We then retain the sites where the actual amount of tree cover is less than what it potentially could be. So this means we've now identified locations where it's feasible in biophysical terms to restore forests. And then as a next step, we remove urban areas. The thinking being that it's going to be much more costly to restore forests in those areas. Of course, we recognize that there's great potential to plant trees in urban areas, and that's an important action that many countries are taking. But the spatial resolution of se.plan is such that it's really not well suited for planning of restoration within urban areas. So we're going to be focusing, or the tool does focus, on rural areas where it's possible to grow trees, but those trees are not currently present at their potential levels. Next slide, please. Now, it's already been stated that se.plan places emphasis on socioeconomic benefits related to restoration, benefits, costs, and risks. Just last week, I did a search online of a couple of bibliographic databases. There's been a lot of research on forest restoration. If you go to Web of Science, a standard bibliographic database, and type in forest restoration as a search phrase, you'll turn up over 3,000 works. that have been published. If you go to EconLit, which focuses on the social sciences, you'll find barely 100 publications. So there's been much less attention paid to the socioeconomic aspects of restoration than to its biophysical aspects. Next slide, please. Now, why does it matter to look at socioeconomic aspects of restoration? Well, it's because the potential restoration sites are most likely being used somehow currently. And the most common uses are to be using the land to grow crops or to graze animals. If we're going to plan for restoration, then it's important that we take into account the costs of giving up use of these areas. And if we hope that restoration is going to succeed and be sustained, then it's important to seek to provide benefits that will matter to restoration stakeholders, including local landholders and communities. Next slide, please. Focusing on socioeconomic aspects of restoration also matters for a very practical operational reason. The price tag for forest restoration is quite high. I've pulled out a sentence here from the UN Decades Strategy for Restoration, and you can read here the estimate is that the cost is likely to exceed $1 trillion US, on average about $100 billion a year. That's a lot of finance that needs to be raised. Next slide, please. And this financing need is occurring at a point when, as we know, public sector funds are quite limited. The chart on the left shows the trend in government balances in low and middle income countries. Balances were already heading downward into deficits well before the pandemic, but they've plummeted since the onset of the pandemic. And on the right, we see a comparison of that annual estimated cost of restoration, $100 billion per year, to the total amount of official development assistance for the environment, which is less than half of that. And then the very last tiny bar is the amount of ODA that goes to agriculture, forestry, and fisheries, basically all rural type activities. So both in terms of the funding that developing country governments have and potential funding from official development assistance, the amounts are quite low relative to the tab that's required for restoration. Next slide, please. And much as there's hope to use carbon markets to drive restoration, at the moment, the prices of carbon are quite low relative to the prices that are needed. Prices for forest carbon projects, whether they're RED or afforestation, reforestation projects, are in the ballpark of $5 to $10 per ton of CO2 equivalents, whereas what's been estimated as being needed to hit the Paris Agreement targets are prices more in the range of US $40 to $80 per ton of carbon. Next slide, please. So in view of the limited funds that are available, it's important to use the funds that are available as efficiently as possible, to use them to generate as high a return as possible. And by identifying opportunities to earn a high return on restoration, we also increase the probability that we'll be able to develop new streams of financing, potentially from the private sector. Next slide, please. Remy showed this map. A key feature of se.plan, a key result from it, is a map that shows the locations where the benefits are high relative to the costs of restoration. And so se.plan generates a benefit cost index ranging from 1 to 5. And in this map of Uganda, the areas where that index is closer to 5 are shaded blue, where it's closer to 1 are shaded red. So we're able to see, literally see the locations where restoration has the most potential to earn high returns relative to its costs. Next slide, please. Regarding the benefits, se.plan currently includes 4 types of benefits, and these refer to the ability of restoration to contribute to local livelihoods, to be a source of sustainable wood production, to conserve biodiversity, and to sequester carbon. se.plan allows users to select the relative importance of these different benefits. se.plan does not decide that for users. Users select how important these benefits are to them, and then the ratings that they've given are used as weights when se.plan calculates a restoration value index for each pixel included in the tool. Next slide, please. And se.plan includes this restoration because we recognize that there are many restoration stakeholders in addition to local landholders and communities. Those stakeholders include national government agencies, international organizations, nonprofit organizations, and the private sector. And we wanted to develop a tool that would have sufficient flexibility to be useful to this wide range of stakeholders. Next slide, please. Regarding the costs, se.plan has information on both the opportunity cost of the land where restoration occurs, and this is measured by the value of the land in agricultural use, either cropland or pasture land, depending on what the dominant use is in the location. It also includes information on the implementation cost, defined as the cost of planting trees, and that includes maintenance for the first 3 to 5 years, that is through the free to grow stage. Next slide. I just want to note that costs do vary greatly. And so there are locations where restoration is relatively inexpensive, but other locations where it's really quite costly. Next slide. I mentioned earlier that there are constraints in se.plan, and these can be used to screen out places where it may be viewed that the risks of restoration are too high. These constraints are in different categories. For example, in the biophysical category, we have information on terrestrial ecoregions, the ecosystems that would naturally occur in a site. And so if a stakeholder wants to rule out forest restoration in areas that are naturally grasslands or shrublands, it's possible to do that. If the user would prefer natural regeneration to planting, we have a variable that provides information on the variability of natural regeneration success. And then lastly, for example, if users want to rule out certain current land covers, perhaps cropland, then that can be ruled out as well. Next slide. And I'll close with this slide. All tools have their limitations. Here are some of the limitations of se.plan. It does not provide information on specific tree species. It does not provide information on specific restoration methods, aside from very broadly the distinction between natural regen and artificial regen. And third, the benefits of the tool do not reflect potential interdependencies between sites. And what I mean by that is, for example, if one is interested in biodiversity, we know that the spatial proximity of restored sites to each other affects the benefits related to biodiversity. For example, if we restore corridors between existing protected areas, we can get larger benefits in terms of biodiversity conservation. At the moment, se.plan treats each pixel as an independent planning site, and so it does not capture those kinds of interdependencies. And so in sum, the usefulness of this tool is really for planning at larger scales, identifying locations where restoration appears to be more suitable. And once those locations have been identified, more targeted planning can be conducted, drawing in additional information that is available beyond the information that's included in se.plan. And with that, I'll wrap up and thank you for your attention.
All right, wonderful. Thanks so much, Jeff, for the overview of the tool. And I think you brought up some really important points on the cost of restoration, the strong emphasis on the biophysical side of restoration, which I think was quite glaring. And I think that's really the value add of this tool, is the focus on the socioeconomic aspects in the planning stage can really be effective for long-term sustainability of restoration actions. But I think we'll have a chance in the question and answer to dig into that a little bit further. The tool hasn't been developed in isolation by the development team, but actually there's been a big effort, and I think at the core of many of the partners on this team is capacity development. But certainly there's been engagement with users and stakeholders throughout the development process. So to give us a broad overview of how the tool has been developed in a consultative manner, we're joined today by our colleague Andrea from the Spatial Informatics Group. I think she's going to be first giving us a demo, and then subsequently we'll provide an overview of the tool consultations. So Andrea, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, unfortunately I couldn't join you all in person, but it's great to be here, at least virtually. Yeah, I am Andrea McMahon. I'm a research scientist with the Spatial Informatics Group in the US. And yeah, I'll be talking about some of the tool development and testing that we've been doing in cooperation with different stakeholders and user groups. Yeah, and so we have a little demo. Yelena, can you open the slides, because there's a link on the second slide of the presentation that would just open it in a tab.
The destruction of forests hurt people and the planet.
Sorry, I think the video is frozen on my side.
While restoring these landscapes offer profound benefits. Storing carbon, improving biodiversity, purifying water and air, buffering against floods and extreme weather, and providing people with food and other resources. The restoration of degraded forests presents an unprecedented opportunity to improve the lives and livelihoods of people around the world. A new planning tool from the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations helps countries and restoration actors grasp that opportunity. The tool is adaptive, customizable, and open source.
The restoration planning module will be integrated inside the se.plan dashboard as an application. This application will look like a website and will be separated into 4 computation steps and 2 result steps. In the first step, you will be asked to select an area of interest for your study that will be used inside the module. 2 possible options are available. The first is to use administrative layers, and the second is to use custom geometries. Once the boundary is selected, you can move to the questionnaire. The questionnaire is split into 2 steps: constraints and restoration priorities. Constraints are a set of criteria that can be activated or deactivated by selecting them inside the drop-down menu. Some constraints allow to mask a range of values, while others are binary. The restoration priorities can be selected using a standard priority questionnaire, which allows you to rank your priorities by importance. Once you've answered all the questions, the module will evaluate all the layer weight values, which will be applied to create the results for the restoration dashboard. In the following table, we'll find all of the layers that will be used to compute the restoration dashboard and the associated weights. Users remain in complete control of the software and can manually modify every layer definition. Clicking on the action button will open a pop-up window displaying a description of the layer and the option to change that layer that will be used for this theme. This layer will be checked for compatibility with the rest of the application. If it's not compatible, the default layer will be used. Once modifications are set, you can click on the Save button or cancel to use the default layer. The recipe section allows a user to load the weights from a previously saved model or use the weights from the questionnaire. Clicking the validation button will display information about the computation to make it clear what information the program is using to run the calculations. The result map below indicates priority areas of restoration based on your specific ranking of restoration objectives, constraints, and risks. Areas in the map in blue indicate a higher return on investment, while areas mapped in red indicate a lower return with regards to your objective. The map could show, for instance, the precise areas where restoring forest would yield the largest potential increases in carbon storage, food positioning, or flood control, relative to the costs and risks. This indicator of restoration potential is prioritized based on your ranking of expected benefits. It represents the ratio of the weighted sum of benefits divided by costs. Costs include both priority and establishment costs. Comparing the relative magnitude of this indicator across space and between sites can help identify which sites offer a high return on investment and which ones offer a low return. Investigate the restoration suitability map to identify some areas that seem promising for planning restoration activities. Once you've identified these regions, you can draw a boundary box around them to run summary statistics for comparison. Presented statistics include a detailed analysis of the estimated benefits, costs, and risks. This information can help you assess trade-offs and restoration priorities between regions of interest.
Forest restoration is complex and requires that decision makers consider a multitude of factors when deciding where to pursue restoration interventions. Decisions include where to restore and which areas hold the highest chances of success. These complex choices require the consideration of a number of biophysical and socio-economic factors. This tool provides a medium to quantify user priorities and help them better understand how restoration interventions will help achieve their goals.
Okay, thank you. So next slide, please. Okay, so now we've seen more detail on what the tool does. And currently we're in the process of testing it in different ways. So we're going through the whole workflow of the tool from the angle of different users, and we're filling the questionnaire on these restoration priorities and selecting layers, and then inspecting the output from the viewpoint of different users, so we can evaluate the results the tool would provide to them. Next slide, please. So part of that is working with regional partners to test the tool locally. And I won't dive into that too much, because later we'll hear two presentations on how the tool is being tested and used in Nepal and Vietnam. And so this is the workflow of testing the tool within a specific regional context and how that would look like. So first, or rather they, would define what layers are relevant and how they hinder restoration activity or how they influence restoration success. And then a couple of different of those settings or recipes can be selected and tested. And we're basically tweaking the input variable selection to see how they change the results and to see if the results the tool provides make sense, basically. And then the next step is then to take those tool outputs and to see if they make sense. And I think on this bit in particular, we'll hear more later on for Nepal and Vietnam. But then what we do at the end is based on their feedback on how well the tool does in identifying suitable areas for restoration. We then see if there's post-processing necessary to better identify those suitable areas. So that's the specific workflow on how we test the tool with the help of local partners who already use it. Next slide, please. But then we're also collecting feedback from a wider group of stakeholders, and those are all people and organizations that haven't used the tool yet, but could potentially use it in the future. So we conducted a survey to see what they see as major constraints or indicators that influence restoration efforts. And we basically asked questions that would tell us how they would fill out the questionnaire in the tool and what variables they think are important for restoration planning in their regional contexts. And so far, we have feedback from respondents from 17 different countries across Southeast Asia and the Asia Pacific region. And a lot of them are from governmental workers and researchers or restoration managers who are interested in planning and identifying restoration suitability. And with those survey responses, we then did a cluster analysis to basically identify user groups who responded in a similar way. And we can already tell that there seem to be users who put a heavy weight on more population-based metrics as influential for restoration success. And some others seem to put a heavier weight on more those environmental constraints. And in the next step, we will run this tool. We will test the tool from those different viewpoints. So we can see what different areas will be selected and identified as suitable for restoration based on what focus those different potential users have. Next slide, please. So basically, as I just said, our next steps will be that we test the tool with different user groups in mind, and we'll see what areas will be identified as suitable for restoration based on what these different user groups think that drives restoration success. And we'll be able to then get feedback on whether these results make sense to them and use that feedback to tweak the tool if necessary. And we're pretty excited about those next steps because we'll be able to actually evaluate the results and see if the tool outputs make sense and how they deem areas as suitable for restoration. That is so far from my side, and I'll hand it back.
Thanks very much, Andrea. Wonderful. So a big thanks to both Jeff and Andrea for their overview of the tool. Now we'll have an opportunity to ask questions from the floor. Just a reminder, this session, of course, is for you as either restoration practitioners, developers, or maybe just observers. So the floor is open. We have a microphone here in the front. So please don't be shy. If you have a question, please go ahead. And the sooner you guys ask questions, the sooner I can be quiet. So. Sure, if you could kindly come up to the microphone, that'd be wonderful.
Currently is two questions. The first one is if any country is using this tool currently, and the second is about the property rights. Maybe in some countries like Colombia, for example, the property rights are not very clear. How you consider that in this tool? Thank
you. Jeff or Andrea, did you guys want to have a go at that?
I can handle the second question on property rights. Andrea, maybe it's better for you to take the first one on which countries, if any, are currently using the tool. Andrea, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. So currently we're already working with partners from Nepal and Vietnam, Rajaram and Hai, who also will talk a little bit like in the second part of this session. So I don't want to take too much away from what they will be presenting. But yeah, in cooperation with them, we help them to learn how to use the tool, and they are testing it locally already. Yeah.
Great. And I'll take the question on property rights. So the tool does currently include a layer on property rights. It's a layer that we downscaled from World Bank information on various aspects of governance, including their property rights indicator. We also drew in information from the Prindex property index. And so there's a layer that predicts the relative strength of property rights for different locations. It's not terribly high resolution. The resolution is at the layer of first level administrative subdivision states and provinces. That's the best that we felt we could do at the current moment. But indeed, the issues around property rights are both complex and very important. And they have a big impact on the level of interest by different potential funders in restoration. We had actually planned to include information on locations where lands are held by indigenous communities. And in the end, we decided not to do that after consulting with those who work most closely with those communities. The concern was that the maps that are available are still very approximate, and in many locations, there are still processes underway to determine whose land it really is. And the concern was that if we had a layer in the tool that showed locations that were held by indigenous peoples and local communities, that could be misleading information, might appear to be more certain than it really is. So at the moment, the tool does not have a layer that identifies land that is specifically held by local communities or indigenous peoples. But as better information becomes available and as advocates for those communities feel that it's legitimate to make that information available in a tool such as se.plan, we'll consider doing it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Great question.
Thanks, Jeff. Any other questions from the floor or also from the chat box online? Let's see. Please.
Yeah, first of all, maybe apologies. So maybe the question I'm asking was already answered, but I was a bit late, so sorry about that. So I'm just wondering if Central Asia is also covered. And second question would be, what's your pixel size? So how detailed is this tool? That would be of interest. Thanks.
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Okay, sure. Yes, Central Asia is covered. Okay, so we have coverage there, and the pixel size. Yeah, thank you for bringing up the map. So you can see Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and what am I leaving out? Kyrgyzstan. Okay, yeah, so those countries are covered. We've got some extension into the Caucasus as well. Pixel size, so 30 meters, but it really depends on the particular layer. So we have 30 meters as kind of a base layer, but some of the information on certain benefits and costs and risks as reflected in the constraints will be at coarser resolution. So I just mentioned, for example, some of the information being at the level of level 1 subdivision states or provinces. So we've relied on existing sources of data to the extent possible, and the resolution of those layers does vary. And we've tried to avoid being excessively precise where we felt that it's just not appropriate to provide a more precise layer. Then we haven't done it. You know, it might be more precise, but it might actually be less accurate. The information might not really be valid at such a fine scale. So we've tried to use some judgment to have the scale of the layers be in line with the accuracy of the information that they attempt to convey. Have I answered your questions?
Perfectly well, thanks.
Thank you.
Wonderful, thanks, Jeff. Other questions from the floor, if there are, please.
Thanks for the presentation. Maybe a question, what about climate change? Is it possible to include the layer that on prospective modelization on water resource, for instance, to ensure that what is done currently will be relevant in the decades to come?
I'll be happy to take that one again. I don't want to hog the virtual microphone here, though. But yeah, so of course, climate's changing, and that does affect the prospects for restoration of forests and other ecosystems. Forests are moving into areas where they did not naturally occur as climate changed and has changed. And they're moving out of some areas where they have long existed. Temperature patterns, precipitation patterns are shifting, and that's affecting the locations where trees can grow. We do have a layer in the tool, and this is derived from the same source as the potential restoration layer. That's the work by ETH Zurich. And so that provides information on how the amount of tree cover would change under projections of climate to the middle of the century. So there is the possibility to bring that layer into operation in the tool and to mask out areas that appear to be less viable for restoration with climate change. You mentioned water. There is a layer on water stress in the tool. So locations that are currently facing water stress can be screened out if the concern is that forest restoration would exacerbate the stress on water resources. We do not currently have that layer, a second version of that layer that accounts for potential water stresses due to climate change. But that's an example of an improvement that could be made to the tool if that's viewed as an important improvement by potential users. Have I answered your question, please?
Yeah, perfect. And Jeff, since you have the floor or the virtual microphone, we've also got a question here from Locke. Locke asks, government policies also greatly influence cost of benefits of restoration on certain sites. If and how does the tool consider this in the analysis? So is there a layer for policy?
That's a great question. The only layer we have that I guess would reflect government policy would be the protected areas layer. And so we have a layer that shows where land has been declared as a protected area. So that's in there, and that could then be used to, either to mask out areas or to mask them in if there's a desire to prioritize restoration either within or outside of protected areas. Beyond that, we don't have policy layers. I'm thinking this through as there's a bunch of layers in the tool, but this would be a good example of where, well, let me make two comments on it. The first is that there are a number of layers in the tool, and I'm thinking here in particular the constraints layers. Some of these might be able to be brought in to reflect the policies of the national government. Oh, thanks for bringing up the slide. And so if there are policies related to forests having to do with some biophysical factors, then those, in effect, those policies could be kind of quasi-simulated by turning those layers on or selecting certain levels of the variables in those layers. But if there is a layer that presents information on policies in a specific country or a location within a country, if that's a spatially explicit layer, that could be brought into the tool. And we have mentioned that the tool is customizable. We've not gone into a lot of detail on that, but if you have a layer that reflects, some aspects of an important policy, then that you could bring that into the tool and bring that into the planning process as it's operated through the tool. So those are my thoughts on it. So, in terms of what's currently in the tool, it's really the protected areas layer that would have reflect to some degree policies, but then you could build in policies to some extent by manipulating constraints that are in the tool if the policies are related to these constraints in certain ways. And then lastly, if you have a spatially explicit layer that provides information on a relevant policy, you could bring it into the tool. Is that an adequate response?
I think it was great, Jeff. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks.
It was posed online, so I'm sure she can respond. Wonderful. So we have time for maybe one more question from the floor, if there is one. If not, maybe I can pose a question to you, Andrea. I think a lot of the comments are reflecting really this desire to maybe customize the tool. Of course, the development was done to provide global layers or layers that are relevant to tropical forest countries and a bit beyond. But Andrea, can you speak a little bit to how or what the potential for the tool has for customization, whether that be on the socioeconomic side or the biophysical side? How can colleagues or interested users input layers that are of relevance to a smaller scale?
Yeah, so currently, as far as customization goes, it's very easy to switch out the layers that are already integrated in the tool. And then, but yeah, adding own layers is at the moment not all that straightforward yet. So that would still require some work. So yeah, adding entirely new land cover masks or constraint layers, that still requires a little bit of development and yeah, support to get that included. Yeah, but being able to actually implement that and have it fully customizable for users to add their own layers at the relevant scales that they see useful, that that would be very exciting to implement soon.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. So a big thanks to both Jeff and Andrea for the presentations. I think we'll take the opportunity to move to the second session where we have two exciting panelists, Hai and Rajaram from the planning divisions in both Nepal and Vietnam. They'll provide overviews of how they've currently been using the tool within their planning structures, some of the lessons and challenges. So I won't take any more time. I think Hai will start with you, right? So please come on up and we'll get started.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Phạm Ngọc Hải. Call me Hải. I'm working for Forest Inventory and Planning Institute in Vietnam, and thank you for. I am very happy to be here to sharing about how we work with se.plan tool, and I would like to share some experience and some challenging with we've been working with this tool. Next slide, please. Yes, yeah. As you know, Vietnam is one country, the country commitment to climate change, and Vietnam has been experiencing deforestation from before 1990, and yeah. Elena, could you share screen?
Yes, he's sharing.
Are you able to see the screen?
Yeah, can you go?
Can you, yeah. Yes. Let me start again. Vietnam has been experiencing about deforestation before 1990, and from 90 up to now, we have forest cover significant increase, more about 42% in 2020, and we have a lot of national forest restoration program like 6.1 and PAM and 3.2.7 and an international commit as REST Plus, and Vietnam is one of early country participate in REST Plus, and for example here we have joined with World Bank Forest Carbon Partnership Facility and for emission reduction program in North Central part of Vietnam, and we have also the submit concept note for the LEAP proposal for the South Central Coast and Central Highland of Vietnam. And Vietnam also issues a national strategy for improving the quality of forest. And forest restoration planning is a key feature identify is current forest cover status and potential area for forest restoration. Forest restoration through national forest enhancement and afforestation is two major intervention to achieve the set target of emission reduction in Vietnam. And forest restoration planning should be both using the accurate and systematic information and should be considered with benefits and cost analysis. Next slide, please. Yes, what's the beneficiary in Vietnam? We have this very useful for the forest state management. We have information about the potential area of restoration and also the land cover chain, hotspot area, and main driver of forest chain to make the decision in insignificant for restoration planning. For public and private and local community have to gain information about the land cover and forest plannings. And for the implementation agency like the FIPI, we work with, we have the useful and tool for improving our strategy decision making for in forest restoration. Next slide. Yeah, we try with working with se.plan tool with the small the one ecoregion, the Central Highland in Vietnam. You can see the in the map the area of testing the tool, and this area has experienced deforestation and forest degradation during 1999 up to 2015. And the main land cover forest chain is chain into the agriculture and rubber tree plantation and cropland. You can see the map is a lot of deforestation and degradation in during the 2010 and 2020 in our maps. And we also the restoration challenging in this area is agricultural land expansion very much, and for restoration we have some strong policy for forest protection and restoration in this area. Next slide, please. When we work with se.plan tool, we work with the parameter setting, which is here we have the local the area of testing. We also playing with the parameter constraint, parameter and restoration indicator. Like we work with the plantation growth rates, carbon above ground carbon, and biodiversity index. When we have some working with cost analysis with the implementation cost. Next slide, please. And here is some first result, our result with working with different parameter, and we check with potential area with visual interpreted, and we comparison with our SWOT, like the current land cover map and remote sensing map to check how the tool is working and how is visible feasible for us. And we also finding the and proposing the parameter and scenario that's mostly suitable for the pilot area and for priority the forest restoration. So next slide. Yes. When we work with this tool, the first one, when we work with harmonizing the country-specific data and forest restoration priority, very different with a lot of input data, and we have also some concern with data input consistency. You see, with the space resolution is 30 meters, and we have as a depth assets, they have a lot of different resolution with the particular, in particular of socio-economics data. And we have also the different between, for example, here we have the different time frame of each data. And we would like to also working with restoration, both of general and detailed planning. And in se.plan tool, we have the good result with general planning as a presentation of ZEPs. And cost parameter like in se.plan tool is key important for country when considering with making the forest restoration. Yeah, next slide. Yeah. In next step, we are working with the evaluation tool with different scenario, and we also the sharing tool with the stakeholder, with the local authority and the forest management. And we have the tool evaluation with in fieldwork validation and also the indoor validation with some the specific tool like the collect earth online and using the high resolution image. And we also have the get feedback to se.plan development tool team, and also we hope we have the Vietnamese version in the se.plan tool in the next future. And thank you for the listening.
Thanks very much. Hi. Yeah, Rajaram, please come. We'll go directly to you. Yeah.
Slide, please. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Rajaram Arial. I'm working in the Forest Research and Training Center under the Ministry of Forest and Environment as a remote sensing officer. Today, I'm here presenting the tool we just use for the planning of the restorations in Nepal, se.plan. Next. Yeah, Nepal is one of the leading Red Plus countries under the World Bank, World Bank Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, and we already did IRPA with the World Bank in the certain area of the Thal region. And similarly, we also did some concept note is already accepted for the leaf purpose. In both of the cases, one of the main interventions of financing the forest is through the restorations. So and also we also introduce the one target in the second NDC targets, and not to lower down the forest and other land altogether below the 35%. Below the 45%, yeah, and forest restoration is really the to evaluate the potential restoration area is really important for us. Next slide, please. Yeah. When we are talking about the landscape approach of in the context of Nepal, there are different drivers. Drivers of forest degradations in Nepal. Altogether, we are already defined around 9. Among them, forest fire, grazing, illegal or selective logging, including the floor. So the major one is in the initial stage, the canopy cover loss, and in the final stage, it goes to the deforestations. So some of the challenges we are facing when introducing the restoration program in the previous stage is like we have a very scattered plots, and those are implementing from the local level institutions, and also the size of the plant we use, and the water source and proper managements after the plantations and the regular monitorings. And yes, the ideal places for us, like the river flood area. We are really interested to reclaim on those floodplain area and the abundant lands, including the degraded land as well. Next slide, please. Yes, there is really the government sector and the private sectors both are are the more beneficial from this restoration project. For the government institutions, we are very happy to give such type of data to the local institutions. Like we have the district forest office. Recently, we can at a divisional forest office, and those areas is really useful for them. And for the private sectors, for the private sector, I mean those huge company who is already get their approval of the EIA, and they need some of the area to plant the trees as for the compensation program. So this information is really helpful for both of them, and we also thinking more about the riverbank protections and the reclaim of the riverbank program from the government side. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the entire area of the Nepal which we use as an area of interest. Normally here I'm just showing the and this is the recent land cover we developed, and we have the 7 provincial area, and we have the 5 physiographic region. Next slide, please. So for this tax, yeah. Oh, thank you. So for this tax, the main theme is like we want to use some of the global layers, and we also introduce our local layers, like we use our land cover or land cover, and we also we use the constants from using the elevation data because we use around 4,000 meters as elevations. It is almost impossible to plant since above the 4,000 meters in the case of Nepal, and also we choose the slope area greater than 45 degree. And yes, in the previous discussions, JFA already talk about the policy. Yes, we also exclude the protected area as we choose as a constant because we don't have the practice of plantation inside the protected area. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the very final results for us. Still, we have to look at the different items later on. From the initial stage, we came up to the around 13.12% of the total country is still potential for the restorations. And we also check with those potential area within the different physiographic region. Next slide, please. This is the same result which we have to we are thinking to provide to the province level offices. Yeah. Next slide, please. So from the initial stage, yeah, we came up to the final stage after the 20 iterations, after using the 20 recipes. Initially, we use the global default values. Then we use our own local level layers. Then we check manual with those areas which we already known about the potential sites. So then we check with the different constants, biophysical constant and socio-economic indicators. Then we iterate. Also, we change and iterate more time to get the better result. Next slide, please. Yes, initially, when we got the first or second level result, then our team think that let's check with some high resolution image using the collectathon line. So then we check with the 1300 points, with the 70-meter box. And normally in the first stage, we are thinking about like, let's export the map as a with the 70-meter by 70-meter to reach at least 0.5 hectare for the plantation, and we can let it consider as a forest as for the definition of the FAO. Next slide, please. Yes, some of the lesson learned from our project is we have it's really helps if we did some post-processing process, like in some of the river flood area, and in some of the seasonal rivers, we can also figure out some of the potential area, which you can see here in the middle of the seasonal river. So we have to eliminate those things. And also in the cropland, abandoned cropland also, we have to think about those things. That is either goes to the against for the agriculture, and else goes to the forest. Yes, still some of the confusion with the built up area. Yes, from the remote sensing side, we captured some of the real estate different parcels, which is abundant for the agriculture and any other practice, but those are separated for the urban building. Those are also captured during these things. And I already talked about the scale. Yeah, the scale is more important when we are exporting our final product. In the initial stage, we export it as with a 70-meter resolution, but that is really we find that is really the poor when we are visualizing. We are checking the accuracy with the CO plan, CO Collective Online project. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yes, some of the photo plots here. Yes, it looks like those are the area which our which se.plan figured out during the analysis. Yeah, and some of the luckily, so here in this between, you can see the small plant, most probably last year planted. Yeah, those are already already started for the restoration program, and that's luckily those area also figure out as a potential plantation area. Next slide, please. Yes, there are. I think I figured out two challenges. One is for the remote sensing people, and another one for the implementation agency. For the remote sensing people, there's such type of seasonal river courses, and also measure as a potential area, and sometimes grassland, and also seasonal abandoned agricultural land. We have to rethink on those, and maybe we can we can develop our own separate layer, not in this national scale as well as in the district level scale, in the little scales, so where we can implement is in the small scale for the individual restoration program. So for the implementation agency as well, yes, some of the, if we give those data to the team, some of the playground, real estate land parcels also measure figure out as a potential area, but those are not really due to the purpose of different layer. So yes, and it is very good if we got the cadastral layer of the is land parcels, then we can introduce the other we can introduce also the private private forests in those area. Yeah. Next slide, please. Yes, that's true. Yes, still we are not in the implementation stage yet. We just developed the first or final version layer. Still we are getting some feedback from the field level implementation agency, and we are also thinking about how we can switching the different options, and we can ranking the evaluation, the score, and ranking also the potential sites. Yeah, and for me, like not only the map, I think so it's better to get some area-based estimations to check our how accurate our map will be. Yeah, thank you. Next slide. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks very much to you both for those presentations. Colleagues, the floor is open again for questions. Also to our virtual participants, if you'd like to raise a question, please feel free to put it in the question and answer. But the microphone's open to anyone. Maybe as we're waiting, Rajaram, can you just tell us on your one of your final slides, you showed a bunch of potential sites that were sort of identified as areas that could be used for restoration. Can you speak a little bit about those sites? They looked like open sort of grassland areas or open fields. Can you say a little bit more about that?
For this, yeah. In the first slides, we have this is also near the river side. So most probably the river changes their courses yearly, and those becomes to the those lands convert to the grasslands. Sometimes you can also see the grazing. Cow is grazing on those grassland. Yeah, those are also the potential sites. But we also have to think like which ecosystem type is important for us. Those are also one of the part of our ecosystem. So for during the implementations, we really have to think all those things. And you can see in the second middle of the first row, yes, that is planted last year, and we check those field from the field after getting the result from the se.plan. Those are also the same story with the previous one. Those are also the river course change area, which is those are the main source of the potential land potential restoration area in Tarai physiographic region of Nepal.
Thanks. Any questions, colleagues? Please.
Yeah, my name is Vân from Vietnam. So thank you very much for the presentation. And I have a question to the Nepal the colleagues. You said that the private sector also get benefit from the data. This is not in my country because the data belong to government and government keep like secrets. So how and what mechanism here in Nepal you share the data to the private sector if they want to get the restoration data from your work? So could you please share with us for that? Thank you.
Thank you. The data is still the data is remain in the Forest Research and Training Center. We are on the process of developing the server system from which we can get easy access to the public, but that is on under the process. In the previous year previous practice, what we did is normally the data will remain in the like Forest Research and Training Center, and the private user came with some of the applications and their potential area. Then we provide them. That is the mechanism. But we are thinking we publicly open all those data from the server system.
Other questions? So I'll pose a question to both Rajaram and Hai. So you guys have, your presentations really outlined some of the outcomes that have taken place from utilizing the tool. Can you elaborate a little bit more in terms of how you guys are using the tool? Is it something that you'll use many times? Is it something that you've currently used once and then you'll be taking to the field to validate? Sort of what part of the planning process, the restoration planning process, is this tool proving to be useful for your planning ministries?
Yes, in our experience, when working with se.plan tool, we working with different parameter, and we also rechecking with our data source, like we have the map and we have some another information from like the new highest new remote sensing data, and to verify indoor verification, and also we have some we will do with the field trip, and before the field trip we working with the local authority to introduce about our result with a different scenario, and we after that we will we'll have the field trip to find out which maybe the suitable or not suitable, and what the difference between the field and what the result. Yes, and I think working with parameter is very difficult for and take to a lot of time to do when we working with se.plan tool. And for field trip, we will work in this a little bit. We know we don't have the time for the check the own of site, and I think this tool very helpful when we have some different scenario, and we quickly result when we have to change some parameter and as a country user needs or user specific. Yeah.
So you're using it for scenario analysis and then prioritization, and then you're going to the field to validate those results. Okay, Rajaram, on your side.
Yeah, for in our case it is a little bit different. We just switching the parameters, and just by observing the different places using the collector online, we feel that that is okay for us. Then we give those data to actually that work is conducting by the RAID implementation center, and they contract out the local contractor to visit all those sites, all those potentials, not all those I mean the representative potential sites, and they are also preparing the site plan and action plan to restore those areas, and they are preparing the map at the small unit. Actually, we have the municipality and rural municipality around 753, and they are developing those 753 maps and giving to the divisional forest office, which belongs to those ward level, those municipality level. Yeah, those are we are thinking at this stage. But maybe we can, but we get too much reflection from the field consultation workshop when we did in the province level. So we are incorporating all those things and share to the team.
Great.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear. I think there's certainly an effort to use this as sort of an evidence tool to take it to the field to start dialogues. I think that's really what the vision of the tool was. Any questions from the floor? Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you if you have started any kind of project of restoration project in one of the areas that are suitable for restoration using se.plan tool. Is there any project already working there?
No, not yet. We did not start it, but for the our institution, Forest Research and Training Center, started to do some research, like choice of suitable species to rehabilitate the degraded land before 5-7 years in the two site pilot site. But yes, in the long run, we did not start it. But our government set a target to plant around I think 10,000 plants this fiscal year.
And Hai, on your side?
Yeah. In our pilot area, yes, we have as my presentation, we have the strong commitment for the forest restoration, and we have the photo we have the and the other concern when we working with which area is, you know, the agricultural expansion very difficult to when we convert to forest to agriculture, very difficult to come back to forest lands. And we have also the focus on not only the agricultural land, we also focus on the change the bare land to this still bare land to the up to the forest. And Central Highland of Vietnam is one of most important for forest protection project in and as for forest restoration. Yeah.
Thanks, Hai. Yeah, so I don't think any of the test cases are yet in implementation. I think the tools provided sort of a planning structure, and then now they're engaging communities and validating the results of the tool. We have time for one more question, if there is one. I'm noting that we're close to the end of the session. We're doing very well for time. So if there's one more question from the floor, we can take it. If not, I'll turn the floor back to Jeff, Andrea, and even Yelena to ask one final question. If I'm interested in the tool and I'd like to use it, if I'd like to be part of one of the capacity development workshops or maybe the focus groups for feedback, how can I begin to engage with se.plan?
Thanks, thanks, Khalil. Yeah, I can give a go at that question. So first, we encourage anyone to sign up for se.plan and try to use the tool themselves. se.plan is accessible through the URL se.plan.io, and following the demo that Andrea showed, you can log on there, find the tool, and try it out yourself. Then if you would like to get in touch with us for any further testing, capacity development, or any feedback on how you would like to see the tool to be further developed, you can get in touch with any of us. I'll put in a generic email for FAO, that's restorationmonitoring@fao.org. You can get in touch with us via that email or any of our personal email addresses. And we're really happy to get any feedback from users on how this tool is helpful, how it's not helpful, and any suggestions on additional information to include.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Elaine. And we'll be sure to make all the presentations and all the information available. So I think that's pretty much the end of the Q&A and the session. I'll share a few reflections from my side. Yeah, I think it's incredible when you look at how much the technology side has advanced, the sheer amount of satellites that are now in the sky, the access to platforms, the access to new algorithms and computing software is really immense. But I think that the key here is that the perfect data doesn't exist, or there doesn't have to be perfect data, rather just the perfect data for the problem statement at hand. And I think this tool doesn't claim to have that perfect data either. But what it does do is it progresses the needle in terms of providing socioeconomic data to planners to try to make the best decisions that they can around where they're going to start implementing their restoration actions. So that's my first reflection. I think the second one is that data really is the enabler, right? And you can have as much data as you want, but really it's about enabling the people in the institutions to co-develop, onboard, and work together to actually start making the best decisions possible. And I think that's what's so exciting about the se.plan tool. I think it's also what's very exciting about the group of partners that are part of the development team and the capacity development team, is that really at the heart from the beginning of this entire process, this tool was rolled out in a consultative manner. There's been a number of focus groups that were done online in various regions. They've reached out to the private sector. They've reached out to government stakeholders, small and large NGOs, and that feedback and consultation, that consistent iteration is what we hope will continue to develop and make this tool a very useful product moving forward. So that's it for me. I will ask you to join me in giving our panelists a round of applause. And just say a big thanks to you. Great to see you all in person. I wish you an enjoyable rest of the week at World Forestry Congress. And I do believe the restoration plenary is happening at the moment. So if you're interested in those topics, please join that. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
We have, yeah, same, yeah, same. Okay.